Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of History Quest. I am your host, Brian Haynes, the director of the McLeod County Historical Society right here in Hutchinson. Let me start out by thanking everybody who came to our first annual Whoopie Fest. It was a great event. We had about 250 people show up. The food was delicious, the band was great, and everybody had a good time. We even got the board of directors to dance the chicken dance with the band in front of the entire audience. It was a great time, and they made me do it too, so anybody who didn't go got to miss me doing the chicken dance, but real fast. It just goes like this, and you wiggle down. So it's pretty easy. But at any rate, you make sure to, we're going to do this thing annually, so we'll do it next year, so you'll get your chance one more time, I promise you that. So this month, I've got 3 stories for you. One about a school fire in Plato, one about the Hutchinson and Harmony, the 2 towns that were right on top of each other that eventually just became Hutchinson. And last but not least, kind of a neat little story about 3M locating in Stuart, Minnesota. Not Glencoe, not Hutchinson, but Stuart, Minnesota. So we will get right on to that in just a second. So sit back and enjoy. It was springtime, 1914. Plato, Minnesota was home to a 2-story brick schoolhouse. The school, though small, was quite a feat for a small town at the time. Built in 1903, the structure was partitioned into 4 classrooms and was considered one of the best schools in McLeod County. Certainly a credit to the Plato School District. It's safe to say that things were a bit different in 1914. Schools were smaller, and graduating high school wasn't always expected of students, especially for those who lived in rural areas. In addition, athletics were not considered as vital as they are today. Hence, the Plato School, like many others, did not house a gymnasium. Aside from school activities, safety was not as regarded in 1914 as it is in 2022. With that in mind, it wasn't deemed a big deal when the school's chimney caught fire. Though the weather was beginning to warm, there was still a need for heating the indoors. Since the schoolhouse was a 2-story structure, a large furnace and chimney were needed to keep students warm through the coldest months of the year. It was common for the chimney to become caked in soot and would occasionally start on fire. In fact, this occurrence seemed to happen in 2-week intervals. Yet, staff and students were aware of this and seldom became anxious that it could lead to any kind of disaster. On Monday, March 12th, at around 1:15 p.m., the chimney caught fire once again. This time, however, the school's principal, George Monet, and several students noted that the chimney was burning hotter than normal. Monet decided to alert the school janitor of the fire and to watch it closely as he feared the chimney fire could result in sparks falling to the roof and igniting it. School work continued through the afternoon. At 2:50 p.m., just prior to students being dismissed, Monet heard a heavy thud from above. His first thought was that a student fell while descending the staircase. Yet, when he stepped into the hall, he found the situation was far more serious. A gleam of light was visible through the hole where the bell rope passed, which meant the garret was on fire. The situation was critical, yet Mr. Monet did not want to cause a panic. He went to each classroom and told the students to pick up their belongings, exit the school quietly, and wait outside. The principal's approach worked, and all the students and staff exited the building without incident. The alarm was raised, and the fire department responded promptly. As was customary at the time, during a community emergency, residents flocked to the fire to aid in what way they could. Unfortunately, there was a lack of water in the community, and this hampered attempts to fight the fire. People worked persistently to save what contents they could from the school. While the roof burned, any movable objects such as a desk, books, musical instruments, or etc. were removed from the school. A valiant effort was made to stop the flames, yet it was in vain as the school was a complete loss. It was a dangerous situation that day, yet in the end, the residents of Plato could count their luck as no students were harmed in the fire. It's probable that the school year resumed in homes and empty buildings in the vicinity of Plato. A new school was eventually built. Yet those who were present in the spring of 1914 would never be able to forget the day the school burnt down. So that was our story about the Great Plato School Fire in 1914. I like that story for the sole fact that the chimney is on fire and the principal's like, oh, no big deal, we'll just get everybody out of here. If that happened today, we'd be like just running for the exit, screaming, fire alarms blaring off, sprinkler systems going down, all would not be well. We would not remain calm, but apparently they did in 1914. Our next story is about the city of Hutchinson, and going all the way back to the 1850s when the city was founded. And for those who don't know, originally Hutchinson was platted as two cities. So you had Harmony, which was like on the north part of what is now Hutchinson, kind of up by the river. And then you had Hutchinson, which was on the south side of the river. So the notion is, it's like, the question is, so whatever happens to Harmony? Why was there a Harmony? What's the deal about it? And a lot of people count it as like a quote-unquote lost town. But really there's a little bit more to it, and I'll have that in this story that's coming up. A Minnesota immigration advertisement from 1857 reads, Minnesota, cure for the panic. Emigrate to Minnesota where no bank exists, and a suspension is unknown. Land and water of the best kind. No fever, no ague. Claims can be made by rich and poor. The man of small means can soon reach competency. The finest lands are open to preemption. St. Paul is the stopping place. From there you can go to any point, as emigrant settlers start daily to the various land offices and districts. There was no doubt that the North Country was highly sought after. The mid-1850s saw a boom in westward migration. Land fever was gripping the nation and sending Easterners and newly arrived immigrants from Europe into a frenzy for good, affordable land. Minnesota, which had achieved territorial status in 1849, was open for settlement by 1855 and was a popular destination for the family looking to head west. In McLeod County, land-hungry immigrants set their sights on the communities of Lake Addie, Glencoe, and Hutchinson, the latter being founded by three of the famed Hutchinson singers. Like all towns, the founders of Hutchinson had their own ideals for a perfect village and did their best to include their ideology into their town's charter. One small detail that often escapes the annals of history, however, is that they did not just create one town, but two. North of Hutchinson, adjacent to the city limits, was the town of Harmony. Being of musical background, it's easy to see why the famous founders chose the name of Harmony. Not only does it have a musical theme to it, but it certainly does roll off the tongue when paired with its southern sibling, Hutchinson and Harmony. When it comes to the latter, however, the story abruptly ends before it even really begins. The founders created a plat for Harmony, yet there was no village square and no real history other than the fact that the name simply vanishes. And what was Harmony then becomes Hutchinson. Few historical records exist when it comes to Harmony, and those that do exist give no real history of the town. The lack of a narrative often leaves people perplexed. What was Harmony, and what happened to it? One could spend countless hours researching the history of Harmony in hopes of finding out what happened. However, a short look into the laws of creating a town site may very well hold the answer as to why Harmony was created in the first place, and also why it suddenly disappeared. A widespread belief in the United States during the 19th century was manifest destiny, the popular idea that North American Europeans were destined to spread out across the continent, settle it, and spread their culture. By the 1840s, it looked as though the manifest destiny ideals would surely come true. That being the case, in 1844, the federal government created the Town Site Act, which laid out strict rules as to how a town site could be attained and platted. One of those rules was on the size of the town site. The Town Site Act states that the settlers of a town on the public domain could preempt their town site as a corporate body to the limit of 320 acres. Put simply, a town site could only be of a certain size. There is no doubt that the founders of Hutchinson wanted a larger town than what was allowed per federal law. It's quite possible, however, that their way of skirting around the rule was to simply create two towns, then have one annex the other. By doing so, the founders could make a sort of claim on more than just 320 acres. It's hard to be entirely certain of the story behind Harmony. Historians can believe one thing, but you never know when new information comes to light that changes history. One thing that is for certain, however, is that when it comes to history, there is often more to the story than what meets the eye. So that was the story of Harmony. Like I said in the story, that's all speculation. I have no idea if it's true, but when you do look at those statutes for creating a town site, it does make sense, and then that would also make sense to why Harmony just kind of disappears off the map, and we don't really know anything behind it, or at least not that I've found. And like I also said in the story, you never know when something comes to fruition and you learn something new. So who knows, next week I might have a totally different take on why Harmony just disappeared. But for right now, I think I'm going to go with the 320 acre town site limit. So the next story I have is a little bit of like a hearsay kind of story. And here again, it's one of those deals where it's really hard to find any kind of like source that says, yes, this indeed happened. So it's a little bit more over hearsay from stories that I've been told by McLeod County residents. But at any rate, you know, if something ever comes out that says, yes, this actually did happen, then it would kind of solidify the story. But as for right now, we're just kind of going on a little bit of hearsay. But hey, that's how news happens these days, right? So it shouldn't matter anyway. That was a joke, by the way. Okay, anyway, so this story is about 3M. We all know 3M as the big company in Hutchinson that has kind of made Hutchinson what it is, really. I mean, you know, prior to 3M, it's a small town. It's a big small town, but it's still just kind of a small town. And then 3M comes, and all these people move in, and the industry takes off, and now Hutchinson is the biggest city in McLeod County. And there again, it's a small city, but it is a city, you know, more so than a small town. Well, at any rate, this story has to do with 3M wanting to come to McLeod County as they're expanding westward, and one of their sites that they were potentially going to pick out was actually Stewart, or according to the story. So sit back, enjoy the story, and we'll come back with a little bit of news on what's coming up at the museum. When you think of McLeod County, several things come to mind. There is, of course, the story of Martin McLeod and the founding of Glencoe, the history of the Big Woods, and one cannot ignore the fact that the area has produced a few folks who have climbed to fame outside of the county. With all the things that define the area, there is one thing that is almost synonymous with the name of McLeod, and that is the Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company, better known to most as 3M. Located in Hutchinson, 3M offers a wealth of employment to many in McLeod County, and even those who live outside its borders. To be honest, 3M has probably been one of the biggest boons in this area's history. The story of 3M goes back to the first plant that opened in 1902. Back then, the company was in Duluth and was a far cry from what it is today. The company at that time was known for making a poor quality sandpaper. By 1907, they were actually close to bankruptcy. Things began to change for 3M right around the time they moved to St. Paul. Success came, and in the 1920s, 3M was leading the field in waterproof sandpaper and cloth abrasives. It was at this time that the company also began creating pressure-sensitive masking tape. By the end of the 1940s, the future of 3M was looking bright. It was time for the company to expand westward. They would eventually lay down some roots in Hutchinson. However, according to a bit of little-known local lore, the city of Hutchinson was not their first choice and may have even been their last choice. Now, a note here, much of what follows can be attributed to hearsay and local legend, as few sources, primary or secondary, can be found in relation to the story. According to the tale, executives of Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing wished first to locate in Glencoe, McLeod County's first community and county seat. Glencoe was a small community, quiet and quaint as a Norman Rockwell-style town would have been at the time. 3M liked the community, not only for its potential workforce, but also its proximity to St. Paul that related to the railroad. As the story goes, however, Glencoe wished to remain as they were, and people were not entirely favorable of a large industry moving into town. With Glencoe out of the running, 3M executives began looking farther west. One choice was the old hemp factory in Hutchinson, and although some within 3M favored the site, others weren't as keen on it, as at that time, Hutchinson had a poor reputation as an industrial center, according to a 1956 article in the Hutchinson Leader. With a Hutchinson location being questionable, executives took a trip by rail through the region to see where else they could build a plant. One site that was apparently favored was Stuart. Stuart, though small, may have been attractive to 3M for several reasons. The railroad ran directly through the village, and with the town being contained to a smaller area, there would be plenty of space for future expansions of the plant had it been built on the edge of the city limits. As the story goes, the city council was notified that 3M was interested in building a site in the town, yet the council chose against accepting any offer as they felt that the town of their size would not be suitable for the industry. In the end, 3M chose Hutchinson's old hemp plant for their location. Their decision was likely aided by some representatives from within Hutchinson who secured a meeting with 3M executives, drove to Minneapolis, and sold them on the idea of moving to their city. 3M agreed, and the rest, as we all know it, is history. So is it true? Did 3M favor moving to Stuart? And if they would have done so, how different would history be? We searched diligently through the archives at the MCHS library, but unfortunately, legends and side conversations don't always make it into the history books, nor are they recorded in official minutes from city council meetings. With that in mind, sometimes a good tale of history is just that, a good tale that is worth remembering and worth telling for precisely what it is. It could be that the story of 3M and Stuart is, and will remain, a bit of local lore. Yet, you never know when something or somebody comes along to provide evidence that something did happen. And when it does happen, it's even more proof that there's always something more to the story. So that was our story of 3M moving to Stuart. And like I said in the story, who knows if it's true? If not, hey, it's a great story just to be able to tell. So it makes you sound like you know something, right? I'd also like to add some events that are coming up at the museum. We have a new group kind of club thing that we're doing, or event that we're going to try doing. Every third Thursday of the month, we're going to have what's called History Writers. And what this is a kind of like a book club. So you go to a book club and you have a book that everybody within the club reads. If you're like me, you don't really read it. You just go watch the movie and then come back to the next, club meeting. But at any rate, everybody reads the book and comes back to the next meeting, and then they kind of talk about the book. What happened, who's the main characters, yada, 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 right? So History Writers is kind of going to be like that, except it's going to be about writing. So if you're a writer, or if you just would like to try writing, or if you just want to come have a cup of coffee and listen to the conversation, you're welcome with that too. But at any rate, so History Writers, we show up and there will be a topic for discussion. We'll have a quick discussion, like I'll present the topic and a little bit of history behind the topic. And then as a group, we'll kind of talk about the topic and then talk about different perspectives you could take on that historical topic. So I'm trying to think of a good one off the top of my head here. Let's just say the founding of Hutchinson, okay? So that would be our topic. I would tell you about the founders and why they came, and then we could kind of talk about the different angles that you could write about it, or just perceive it, view it if you're not gonna write about it. And so maybe we write a piece about land fever, people coming in and wanting to grab land and do whatever you can with it. Or maybe we want to write a piece about the great westward expansion, and the Hutchinson singers coming out. Or maybe we want to write a piece about how you have this push for this progressive I don't want to say agenda, but like this progressive ideas at this time when it comes to like, anti-slavery, anti-drinking, voting rights, that sort of thing. So you would have these different kind of angles or perspectives that you could write about the history of it. So we would talk a little bit about that. You could take it if you wanted to and then bring it home and write something short about it. It doesn't matter if it's 5 words, 5 sentences, 5 paragraphs, doesn't matter. Bring it back to the next meeting the month following, and then you could share it with the class. You could share it with the people that are around, talk about it, give each other tips, kind of give and take what you can from each other, and then we would have another topic that we would discuss and move on and so forth. So like I said, kind of like a book club, but it's a writing thing. Kay Johnson from the Hutchinson Leader will be there if she can. I talked to some other writers who plan on coming. I'll of course be there, so we'll see if it takes off. If we can get a crowd to them, we'll continue doing them. If it dies a natural death, then so be it. We're kind of just throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks. But so far, a lot of people seem interested in it, so hoping good things. That'll be at 2 o'clock. May 19th, so always 2 o'clock on the 3rd Thursday of each month. Then again on June 16th would be the second meeting. So we'd have May 19th, 2 p.m., and then the next one would be June 16th at 2 p.m. On June 2nd, we have a gentleman from Hutchinson named Jeff Milton, and he'll be coming to the museum, and he has an interesting hobby. He is a metal detector enthusiast, I suppose you could call it, because the metal detector is actually the tool that they're using to find what's in the ground. So, well, a metal detective maybe? I'm not quite sure how you word that. But anyway, this guy likes to dig up history. And it's kind of interesting. I've talked to him a little bit. I've talked to others who do this. And just the methods they use, the different things they find. And it's very much a history kind of, hobby. You kind of typically think about people out at the beach combing through the sand trying to find a nickel, or somebody's lost ring. But this is a little bit more in depth. They find places within a community, historic places, and they get permission to go in there with their metal detectors, and they find just all kinds of neat objects. Well, Jeff is going to be at the museum on June 2nd. That's a Thursday at 5:30 p.m. So we're going to do an evening gathering here for this. And he's going to share some of his finds as well as kind of how you do it. And he was going to try and bring some of his colleagues who also do this, so we'd have a whole panel of metal detecting people out there sharing their hobby with us. And I'm actually pretty excited about that one. I think it's kind of cool. We're calling it Digging Up History. So if you're free on June 2nd at 5:30, make sure to come down for that. And again, that's free. Then on June 6th at 10:30 a.m., we're going to have a little roundtable discussion on D-Day. It's June 6th, and so of course that is D-Day. And our roundtable discussions are pretty popular if it's got a good subject, and this one has a pretty good subject. So if you're interested in World War II or D-Day, or there again just want to come hear some good conversation and have a hot cup of coffee, stop down on June 6th at 10:30 a.m. So that's all we have for you this month. We had our 3 stories. We got plenty going on down at the museum, so I hope to see you there soon for one of these events or just to stop in and say hi. So we'll see you next month, and thanks for watching.